5 p.m. work session. The Honorable William Bill Edwards. The Honorable Mayor Pro Tem Mark Baker. Present. The Honorable Catherine Robb.
Present.
The Honorable Carmelita Jones. The Honorable Helen Willis.
Present.
The Honorable Naima Gilliard. The Honorable Rosie Jackson.
Here.
And the Honorable Councilmember Khalid. Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Okay. First presentation.
First presentation is by the Parks and Recreation Department.
Good evening, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to share a high-level view of parks and cultural affairs. I'm going to start with our 2019 accomplishments and then get into our 2020 vision. My name is Lakita Ford. I'm the program manager, and this evening I will be presenting on behalf of our director, Mr. Tony Phillips, who unfortunately couldn't join us today. But I assure you, we've gone over this presentation together, so I'm well equipped to take a deeper dive into any of the topics that we presented here today. Just as an overview, I'm going to briefly cover programming, facility operations, as well as our plan forward. So to begin with our programming, one second. All button works every time. So to begin with our programming, currently Parks and Cultural Affairs offers 33 services in 5 categories. Now, we certainly have planned to grow that. And so what we're going to do is spend the next 90 days in a series of interdepartmental work sessions with the goal of developing staff, really taking a look at what skills that we currently possess in-house. We want to really focus on our data management tracking systems to get a better idea of how many patrons and citizens are coming in and out of our facilities each day, and use that data to help us guide our choices forward. And furthermore, we want to really take a look at how to build effective public-private relationships. And that goes directly into our second initiative, which is increased public engagement. We want to make sure that we're literally touching and listening to our citizens to ensure that the program additions that we offer and where we offer them are really in line with what the residents are looking for. Now, we have uncovered a couple of ways that we intend to do that. Obviously, the Parks Master Plan is going to sort of be a collective effort, but we really want to start deploying surveys, emails, websites, and to grow our Ready, Set, Go Parks newsletter, which, as you know, was also started in 2019. It has currently been very successful in a way that we've used to communicate what's going on in our facilities, upcoming events and programs. So we really want to take some effort to expand and extend on how we communicate to our citizens. Now, with those 33 program offerings that I mentioned, we currently have a pipeline of 23 initiatives, new ideas that have been vetted and are currently in what we call the assessment phase. And as I mentioned, a large part of that assessment is engaging citizens to make sure that we're employing the right programs in the right areas at the right time of day. Now, we've already seen 4 of those programs come off that vetting list, if you will, and have already been launched or will be launched within the next 60 days. And they include the Adult Basketball League, SWIFT STEM program, which is an after-school program geared towards middle schools, which is currently being held at 2 of our facilities. And we have another program that's going to start within the next 30 days that will be at a 3rd recreation facility with a 4th for January, as well as the addition of an adult kickball league in the spring. Now, the other programs that are sort of still in that pipeline, ready to be implemented, are in a variety of categories as I've listed: arts and education, cultural engagements, athletic teams, sporting competitions, fitness programs, and adaptive sports is another area that we're going to spend some time developing. Now, through all of that, our anticipated outcomes are, for one, to activate new programs. We want to constantly, consistently be looking to build a robust program portfolio to service our citizens. We also want to focus on not just implementing programs, but actually increasing enrollment. We want citizens engaged and active. But with that growth also comes the opportunity to grow revenue opportunities. Now, the chart that you see in front of you is a listing of those 33 programs spread out. Now, they are a combination of internally run programs, externally run programs through instructor service agreements, as well as youth associations. And if you notice, I did put an asterisk by youth associations at the bottom because I do want to spend some time speaking to the delivery model of the youth associations. But also pay attention to the items that are highlighted in blue. These were the 11 programs that we added to our roster in 2019. Facility operations. Now, in order to continue to service and enhance our programs, we had to take a really good look at evaluation of our human capital. And as we all know, this is our most important resource. And upon that evaluation, we noticed that we could do a better job with getting maximum effort. So we have completely revised our entire scheduling model, which will increase efficiency. It's going to extend facility hours, as well as add Saturday operation across all of our facilities, which we currently have at one location. Now, this increase in capacity will also allow us to employ paid staff members into the parks, which will give us some direct oversight of those youth associations, which as of right now primarily take place after our normal business hours. The current usage versus the anticipated expanded usage is quite simple. For one, all of our facilities will now be open from 7 a.m. and then will close at 8 o'clock p.m., as well as having Saturday operations from 9:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. across every site. Now, there will be some adjustments here or there depending on programming and seasonal needs. Another part of our facility operations is the transition of our parks maintenance division. Now, starting October 1st, we transitioned, and all of those participants or members were converted from part-time to full-time. We've implemented a work order system that will allow us to identify and respond to issues in our parks or facilities with a decreased time, having a little more accountability. Our parks maintenance improvements, as you notice on the right, we have a list of 2020 capital projects that we're comfortable that we can get started with those staff members. Anticipated outcomes immediately will be our signage throughout our parks and facilities, upgrades to the weight room and cardio, as well as just general improved facility and parks maintenance. Park Rangers Division. This is a program that we recently launched and added to our department. It has been wildly successful. We currently have 5 park rangers that patrol 17 parks. They rotate, and of course, their schedules change depending on what programs are being offered at the time, what season, and we always have the support of our PD department if need be. If you look there on the right, we have a list of statistics. As you can see, they're very proactive in enforcing parks ordinances, preventing break-ins and thefts just with the visibility of law enforcement in our parks, and also preserving that family-friendly environment that all of our citizens come to expect and deserve. Parks Master Plan. Now, I know this is a term that we have heard for quite a long time, and I'm certainly happy to say that this Parks Master Plan has officially begun, and we have set a firm date for 2 weeks from now to host our first staff meeting with the consultant And shortly after that, we will be implementing a date to do a community launch with this Parks Master Plan. Now, this plan is proposed to take about 9 months from start to completion, so that should put us roughly around June or July of next year in the summertime, which is really good timing because all of the answers and questions that we have folded into that plan will be right before the time for budgeting next year, so we can strategically decide where to put funding and resources so we can maximize the 9 months worth of studying. Our plan forward. As many of you may know, myself and Tony Phillips, we recently traveled to the National Recreation Parks Association Conference in Baltimore, Maryland. And it was a combination of 8,000 Parks and Rec professionals from all across the U.S., industry-leading speakers. And one of the most common themes that we heard across the board was a volunteer program. And this is something that we plan to implement within the next 90 days. We know that feasibly we can't staff to cover as many acres as our city allows us. However, it's important that we create a volunteer program that allows us to have support in our programming, resources. And a big part of that, as I mentioned, is engaging with citizens, letting people know what opportunities are available to get involved, incentivizing those people who want to be a part. We really want to take time to make people feel like volunteering and being a part of our department is a big deal. The more invested they are and attached, we think the better the outcomes will be from internally or externally run programs. The transition of the Southwest and the South Fulton Arts Centers. Now, we all know that this has been an ongoing process and still moving forward. In the interim, Parks and Recs, along with the General Service Department, we have done facility walkthroughs to really get a strong evaluation of the current status, the current state from facilities, grounds, as well as personnel, to get a true understanding of what programs are offered, how they're offered, what service model they are incorporating, because our goal is to transition with the least amount of disruption to what is currently available to the participants and the members of our community. There's also a strong emphasis, the Southwest Arts Center has long-standing relationships and partnerships with different theater companies, shows, programs, so we want to take a long, hard look to see how many of those relationships that we can continue moving forward, again, as to not disrupt all of the activations that are currently taking place. And finally, our plan forward, some of the items that we have coming up. With our procurement department, we put out a bid for concession services. We were not completely satisfied with the responses that we got back, so we kind of hit the reset button to think there's some new and creative opportunities to be able to provide vending concessions at our parks and in our facilities, and we will have some further discussion about what are the best way to do that. We do know that all of our parks and facilities will have a viable concession option that is managed and maintained by the city, and we anticipate launching that in January of 2020. Grants, funding, we have some grants that we've received from the Atlanta Hawks Foundation. We still are in the process of Bloom Playground Grant, Land and Water Conservation Grant, as well as the U.S. Mayor Council Grant on childhood obesity. All of those grants are submitted, and we are waiting for the results if we receive funding and when those programs will be able to launch. And we do also have some pending applications that myself and our grant administrator have already started to work through the applications for. And as far as our city and cultural events, we have a few that are listed here on the right that we have proposed and started to work out the outline and details of how we would implement a few of those activities within this fiscal year. Questions, comments?
Thank you so much.
No, you go ahead.
Okay.
So,
let's start with the Southwest Arts Center. My question is really about our budget. I'm not sure that we have budgeted for, in 2020, the staff, the maintenance of the building, or even the creation of a cultural affairs position, because with this and some of the other properties that we're hoping to bring over in 2020, it's going to cost money to run and maintain those. So actually, let me first start with the people first, what Susie Orman says. Have we communicated with, and feel free to jump in, have we communicated with the employees at the Southwest Arts Center about our transition?
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, so we have started having conversations, but we have not gone through the official transition process. In correspondence last week, the county manager and I agreed to allow them to coordinate their transition plans to present to us in an administrative meeting that I believe is scheduled for this Friday. At that time, we'll follow up with the council, and then after receiving direction from you, we'll go with their staff. But the next council meeting is when the rubber will meet the road on that.
Okay, I know some people are watching tonight, and just I just want us to communicate with them. I know that in the past when we transitioned some departments, the communication hasn't been clear, and in the absence of communication, rumors start, and people get worried about the job. So I just, whatever we're going to do, I want to make sure we communicate that with the folks. I know that you don't have hard numbers ready tonight, but so that we begin thinking about it as a council, what is the cost of operating that center from staff to maintenance? Is it and I know you don't have the exact numbers, but is it in the hundreds of thousands? Is it in the millions? Like, what should we be budgeting for?
Well, so I think our budget, remember, our total budget that is included is about $1.8 million for the acquisition of those facilities, and we put about $450,000 for operational costs that we have not allocated in any direction. I would look at those as one large pot of money of about $2.3 million is our overall allocation for both Southwest and Wolf Creek. We are preparing a briefing document. I've actually received the first draft of it, and again, at the next council meeting, it's probably more appropriate to deliver that information because we don't have enough information to deliver at this time. So right now, I would say that the $2.3 million that we have allocated, we believe is appropriate for FY20, but that may change, and we will bring that information to the council at the last meeting in October.
All right, and so switching, I have some of the same questions around Parks and Rec. Do we actually have a delivery date of a report for the Parks Master Plan? I know you kind of gave us.
Yes, it's estimated. The consultant that we're working with has done over 400 Parks Master Plans, and the time frame that they gave us was 8 to 10 months. We do have a start date, which is the 15th, October 15th, for our first internal staff meeting. But we're at a range right now until we really dive in. That can get as early as 7 months. It can get as late as 10 months.
And I have the same concerns about, I've talked to some athletic associations and with Mr. Phillips, and I understand that just the uniforms alone is a six-figure expense.
Well, collectively, per park, when you're talking about football and baseball, you're looking roughly at about $30,000 for uniforms, and we have 3 parks. So it's a big chunk of the budget, but it should not exceed 6 figures.
Okay, so yeah, the uniforms, the staff, to bring everything in-house, because I feel like that might be the direction that we're headed in.
With the other sort of line items, when you look at uniforms as a line item itself, league fees, officials, equipment, things like tackling dummies, water coolers, things like that, that number in total will exceed 6 figures, but we have a pretty good handle on what the cost is for that.
I just think it's important, again, Mr. City Manager, that we get those, even if they're estimates, sooner rather than later, so we don't feel sticker shock when we get these things back. And the last thing I will say, I know that we're going to be hearing from our lobbyists, and one of the, in addition to just bringing the associations in-house, another thing that we'll be looking at are the capital improvements that are needed across our parks, and that is going to be a huge bill. And I hope that we will be able to use a new T-Splosh to pay for some of those things. So just the timing of when this one sunsets and when we can start a new one, I would like to hear some more about that in the coming work sessions. Thank you.
Just a couple of things. Concessions, when do you all plan to work on taking that in-house? Because what I did notice at a couple of parks is that there's a huge revenue opportunity missed on behalf of us not taking and owning and controlling our own concessions. I was at the park this previous weekend and they were selling rib plates for as much as $10, and that park was packed. And so all of that money, when I asked Mr. Phillips where was it going, he said it goes directly to the Athletic Association. And so our water, our energy, our facility is being used, and we are not in control of the revenue that is being generated from that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Those are some very valid points. And it's one of our strongest arguments that we recommend taking that association model and running it internally. Now, yes, to Councilman's point, there will be some added expenses, but we believe that the revenue opportunities with that acquisition will help to offset that. And to answer your question about the plan forward, so the model that we're currently looking into is a vendor model, where we would have employ someone to be point of contact, permitting, selecting vendors at each of our parks, and we would still maintain the revenue from that. However, with our current concession stands, we do have significant improvements to make to bring those concession stands up to code. That's another consideration why we have elected to the immediate solution to look at the vendor model.
But that particular concession stand was being used. It was an operation, and they were pretty much barbecuing out of that particular concession stand. So that one, I'm not sure, if code was an issue, because they were essentially using fryers and barbecues to sell out of that concession stand.
Council member, code is an issue, and that's why we haven't been implementing this model, and why the staff is looking at putting that procurement back on the street and making those improvements. But what we have discovered is that there's a need for better collaboration and enforcement. So when person A rents the park or rents a portion of the facility and has an event, if the concessions is not a portion of that, which in many times it isn't, then we'll be notifying the park rangers and code enforcement so that they are in the parks monitoring that. And if anyone attempts to coordinate those activities, we would then stop and prohibit them from proceeding.
Right, but when you are having football games and basketball games and baseball games, it's unreasonable to think that people are not going to want concessions. I'm just saying that we need to get to the point where we're in control of what happens with concessions.
We agree. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I do agree that it may generate some expenses taken in over the athletic programs. However, we forget that these programs are not going to be for free. So the average cost that people are paying for their kids to play in these programs is anywhere from $200 to $250. And so, I do know that I would like us to look at an opportunity to, if we're controlling it, maybe figuring out how we can lower that cost by maybe some negotiations with some of the vendors that we are ordering uniforms. If we're ordering all of our uniforms from one vendor, maybe we can get them at a lower cost.
No, you're exactly right.
The task force for the park, when is that going to be initiated? We have a task force, and that task force was supposed to be supposed to be initiated to work with you all for this master plan and to also bring forth recommendations and program recommendations they would like to see in the park. So do you know when you all are gonna start working with the task force?
Good evening, Melanie Winfield. I spoke with Director Phillips about that probably a couple of days ago, and we're anticipating the first meeting being held within the next 30 days.
Okay, thank you. Revenue maximization, I just wish that we look at all of the programming, all of our contracts, because right now, I just feel that the city is getting short end of the stick. I mean, we're getting only 89% of most of our contracts, where some of these organizations that's offering programs in our parks are walking away with over 90% of the revenue. Not saying they're not offering good programs, but if we're left to maintain the facility, we're left to make sure that the maintenance of our fields are on us, then we need to make sure that this is an equitable responsibility. For example, Diggs gave Waccamaw Park $5,000. And so that money did not go to the city of South Fulton. It went directly to the association. And I'm not saying they're not going to be good stewards of that money. What I'm saying is that the city of South Fulton, how will we know? Youth programming, 6th grade to the 8th grade or 6th grade through high school. I would like to see more improvement in that area. Right now at Waccamaw Park, there's no youth programming for after school for kids who are in the 6th grade or above. And that's a huge missed opportunity, because that's where we have most of our challenges.
You're correct, and currently with Waccamaw as an example, our staff to participant ratio is 1 to 20. So with the current staff that we have at Waccamaw, it's required all of our resources to run our after-school program that's geared towards the elementary students. I mentioned a little bit earlier, we do have 2 STEM programs that are geared specifically to middle school and high school students. One is Future Seekers, which is currently run in Quill Park, as well as Sandtown, and SWIFT, which is also a STEM program for middle school students, will start at Burdett this month with the expansion plan of the second location, which is set for Waccamaw in January. Now, however, those are also models that we have to use other organizations, just simply because our 1 to 20 staff ratio would not allow for us to bring additional programs with the same amount of resources, but we do have program options for the middle school students currently.
So how's the contract set up? Are we getting, they're walking away with over 90% of?
No, so with the 2 organizations that are currently there, they are funded, so it is a free service to the participants of that program.
Okay.
We don't have a revenue share model with the organizations.
Okay. All right, and that's it. That's all I have for right now. I'm looking forward to the day that we take more ownership of our programs and our youth athletics, and not pushing volunteers and the head coaches that we have in place out. I think they're wonderful, and I appreciate their service, but we need to figure out a way that we can incorporate them into our model, because I did research, and most cities do not have youth athletic associations.
Okay.
I want to kind of touch on 2 things that have been mentioned previously. I'm glad to hear that Parks Commission, its board is being brought together, because I know we all want to make sure we have representation across the city from residents. And so as we talk about what programming is coming to the park, that really needs to be informed by what residents want to see and what they want to participate in. And so when we're working on a park master plan, have you done any kind of surveys to even bring the ones that are coming forth now?
Yes, certainly. So we currently have a vetting process, which is a 9-step process that includes everything from an initial plan on the page to a strategy session with those organizations, as well as our staff across the board. And there's a large percentage of that vetting system that requires citizen and community feedback. So even before the Parks Master Plan takes place, we have already started to implement community engagement activations to make sure that we are getting feedback before we put new programs into the portfolio. And like I said, also knowing where these programs need to be situated to service those needs.
Yeah, I definitely would like to see that, and if it's any kind of survey, I would also like to make sure that I get that information so I can push it out. I was at Sandtown's homecoming this weekend, and I got a lot of feedback, and so I want to make sure that we're hearing from all segments of the population, the rest of the population. And then finally, I'll hold it, because I think these are questions that, whenever Mr. Phillips comes back, it makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Next item, City of South Fulton 2020 Legislative Agenda Presentation by Andrew Long of A.R. Long Company.
Good afternoon, Mayor Bill Edwards, City Council, senior staff, and everyone here. My name is Andrew Long, A.R. Long Company, and I am here to present briefly the 2020 City of South Fulton Legislative Agenda for your approval, so that we can get started in a timely manner prior to the 2020 legislative session. Parenthetically, the first thing we can introduce legislation for the upcoming year is November 15th, which will be here before you know it. I have 10 items that I want to go through real quick, and obviously I will open up the floor for questions. Procedurally, let me say at the beginning, I've had the opportunity to get information from all of the department heads for the City of South Fulton, and I have had an opportunity to speak with each of you individually. Some of you I owe a response to, which I'm going to give in this report. First of all, number one is the Fulton Industrial Boulevard. House Bill 121 is not dead. House Bill 121 was tabled until the 2020 legislative session. I have recently had a brief discussion with the governor concerning 121 and others concerning this bill. And we feel that with continued education on Fulton Industrial Boulevard, the district, on continued education and continued widespread media across the entire strip, and talking to some of those business owners, that we would have a better chance of getting 121 passed in the upcoming legislative session. But we will be bringing it off the table to get it passed through the Senate. It has already passed the House. Number two, City of South Fulton name change on the November 2020 ballot. That one is pretty simple. I simply want to stay in line with what you all are doing and make sure that the timeline of your decisions follows the timeline of what needs to be done at the Capitol. As long as a state legislator introduces that in the SLOGO committee, the State and Local Government Committee, and it is voted on by both chambers, then it will be allowed to be on the ballot in 2020 for a name change, and the residents of the city can ultimately decide. Casinos in Georgia. I don't think casinos in Georgia is actually going to be a bill that I carry on behalf of the City of South Fulton, but it is something for me to monitor. I am aware that you have been contacted by developers who are interested, if the bill passes, of potentially doing some development in the City of South Fulton. Obviously, currently as it stands, there's no casino gambling allowed in the state of Georgia. There was a bill last year to change that, to allow casino gambling. It did not pass, and they will be coming back with another bill this year. That's something for me to monitor closely and keep you, and report back to you on as significant developments arise. Heat-related youth sports injuries, number 4. This is something that has been followed closely by a few of your legislative legislative delegation members. I believe one of your legislative delegation members has language that they want to introduce next year. I have not spoken to him specifically about this bill, But this will be a bill that I plan on making sure we get passage through the General Assembly on next year. And we have to obviously iron out all of that language. This will not just be simply something I'm monitoring, but a piece of legislation on behalf of the city of South Fulton. Short-term rental regulations. Candidly, I got a phone call from Airbnb earlier this summer. They were looking to beef up some of their consulting, and they ultimately chose a different consultant, still a good friend of mine. Mr. Mayor, I believe he called on you a few months ago to sit down and have a conversation. With short-term rentals, there is a bill in the legislature now regarding short-term rentals, but that bill is going to be specifically in favor of Airbnb and those short-term rentals. It's not going to be in favor of some of the cities and the municipalities. So I need to hear from you all exactly what you want on that issue, but I've placed it on our list of bills for the 2020 session. The City of Atlanta and Fulton County require hosts to pay annual business license fees, and their properties are subject to the county's hotel motel tax. The current proposed legislation would have repealed the city and county regulations, but again, like I said, that did not pass. I know a lot of you have questions on that, and I am ready to answer those at this time. But if we ultimately on this issue, if we want to carry a bill on behalf of the city of South Fulton in regards to short-term rentals for the state of Georgia, we can do that. Number 6 is the T-Splosh. The current T-Splosh you have now will sunset on March 30th, 2022. And the T-Splosh is very specific into where those monies go, into where the tax dollars from that T-Splosh to where it goes. I've heard from some of you that you want to change what the T-Splosh will be funding, and that is something that we can look at. Or I've heard that maybe we need to end the T-Splosh early. I know that the T-Splosh is going to be a big discussion this evening. I have it outlined as something that we need to tackle in 2020. But again, it sunsets on March 30th, and in order to ensure continuity with Splosh projects, there will need to be a vote in the 2020 general election that will allow the county and residents to vote and approve the sales tax for another predetermined period of time. That has to happen in order for it to continue. Or if it's, the pleasure of the council for it not to continue, that can happen as well. Number 7, EMS licensing. I worked so closely with Representative Roger Bruce last year on HB 121. The onset, or at the beginning of the legislative session, he said, Andrew, 236, leave that to me. And I said, okay. He said, that has to go through a different route. If I need your influence or if I need your help, I will let you know. HB 236 did not pass. HB 236 was introduced and the past session to amend the code section to allow for licensing process for emergency medical transportation, allowing anyone who is licensed to contract with licensed ambulance providers to supplement the first responders coverage of such geographical area. The bill was assigned to House Public Safety and Homeland Security, but it never came out of the committee. It essentially died in the House committee. So it's not like it passed one chamber and went to the other chamber. It died in the House committee. So that one is also eligible for us to bring up again and carry for the 2020 legislative session. Number 8, securing funding to renovate existing recreation centers. The Recreational Trails program is a federal grant funded by Federal Highway Administration and administered at the state level by the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. We do have a good relationship with the commissioner of the Department of Georgia Natural Resources, and this is something that has 2 options. Number 1, we can go through the General Assembly and pass a bill and try to get funding in that capacity, or we can go through the department and he can make a department code through the department that will also allow us funding through some of the federal grants that that the commissioner has through his department. So it doesn't necessarily have to go through the General Assembly. Finally, the solid waste transfer station. Currently, the Environmental Protection Division does not require solid waste transfer stations to be formally permitted and have permit by rule provisions that, if met, presume the station to be permitted. All local ordinances must be met for the permit by rule to be valid. Although EPD does not verify compliance with local ordinances prior to acknowledging a permit by rule application, if EPD becomes aware of a violation of local codes, the operation will be considered non-compliant with the permit by rule and will be notified by EPD that they are handling solid waste without a permit. This is something that I believe would not go through the General Assembly or through the state of Georgia, but through the Department of Environmental Protection Division. This would be something that we would have to continue to establish a greater relationship with the executive director of the Department of Environmental Protection Division and go through his department and not through the General Assembly. I don't think this will take legislation for what you all are trying to do. And finally, number 10 are items that I am going to monitor. I know that you're going to have questions about these. I know that you're going to want me to be specific about these. But again, these are not bills that you would need to carry on behalf of the city of South Fulton, legislation per se, but it's bills that you want me to monitor for you to keep you posted on. Number 1, or A, Fulton County Juvenile Point System. The point system in Fulton County, and I owe one or two of you some explanations on this anyway. The point system in Fulton County does not go through the state of Georgia. There is not one law on the books in the state of Georgia that governs all 159 counties to say, this is your point system and this is how you should do it. The point system, to my knowledge, is something that has been established through policy in the Fulton County government and the Fulton County juvenile system. If we want that point system changed in our city, which is inside of Fulton County, we would have to go through Fulton County government and the Fulton County Board of Commissioners through policy to get that changed. Now, that doesn't mean we can't do it. We can absolutely do it, but it's just something that we would have to go through Fulton County and not the state of Georgia. And I'm at my time briefly. The heartbeat bill obviously was delayed last week by a federal judge, so it would not go into effect January 1. A lot of you want me to keep my eye on that, and also in that language, whether or not at the point of pregnancy is the same point to where child support would commence. And that is something really, but if it never goes into effect, that's nothing that we have to, at the moment, it's delayed but not dead. The federal judge didn't kill it, but he just delayed it so it won't go into effect January 1. Governor Kemp's Study Committee on Gang and Youth Violence Prevention. This was a resolution, not a bill, House Resolution 585. They've met twice already, once in Savannah, once in Augusta. They are going to meet again on Thursday, October 17th in LaGrange, Georgia. I'm glad to drive down to LaGrange to be a part of that meeting. And then at that point, after the third meeting, they give you recommendations for language for a bill for next year. So as soon as that third meeting happens, I can come back to you and say, I was at that third meeting, this is what happened, here are the recommendations, and this is what they're planning for the 2020 legislative session. Single-use plastics. Again, this is another issue that does not go through the General Assembly of the state of Georgia, but Georgia currently has no statewide policies on single-use plastics. If it's something that we need to address or something that we need to change based on waste and waste being dumped improperly, that's something that we have to go through the county on and not the state of Georgia. And finally, lighting on Camp Creek Parkway. I've been educated on the fact that you turn down Camp Creek Parkway late at night on most evenings, and you go past Camp Creek Marketplace, it's pitch black. And that's a safety concern, that's an issue that needs to be taken up. That process would go through the board of the Georgia Transportation Board, Georgia Department of Transportation Board. And the person who represents this area, her name is Dana Lemon. And Ms. Lemon would have a list of projects coming out of this specific area, and it would be on us, me included, to use my influence to talk to her and say, listen, this project needs to be at the top of the list if this is what we desire. So again, that is not something through the State Department, through the state of Georgia or the General Assembly where we pass a law, but we do have to go through a state agency, which is the Department of Transportation, and talk to our state board transportation member. So with that, I yield the floor for any questions, and I'm grateful, again, you know this, I'm grateful to be able to represent the city of South Fulton, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Councilman Morales first. Let's start with the T-Splosh. Yep. Can you just give, because I don't think that I'm not clear about when this T-Splosh actually expires. What is the actual last date of collection under this T-Splosh? When could a new T-Splosh start?
Yes, sir. The sales tax, the T-Splosh started on April 1st, 2017, and was designated to last 5 years, which will end on March 30th, 2022, when the maximum amount of $655 million is reached. So, March 30th, 2022.
Is it, and I'm just asking for the possibility, because March 30th, 2022 would be the budget year after next.
Correct.
Is it possible to end it early?
Through legislation, to my knowledge, yes.
All right, but we definitely, this is not something that we have to tackle in this particular
Session.
session.
That's correct. That's correct.
I don't want to just make a decision, you know, I don't even want to call for a decision out of my own concerns about the park T-Splosh without understanding how it would affect the T-Splosh, or how committed, are those funds committed, have we committed funds and projects? I think we have all the way through 2022. So as we're thinking about when we get this Parks Master Plan bill back, we wouldn't necessarily be able to use T-Splosh funds to pay for any of these projects until the middle of the second fiscal year after we began working on
That's correct.
Parks projects.
That's correct.
I have another question, but I'm going to ask respectfully if I can come back.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, you can. Ms. Jackson?
Thank you first for,
Yes, ma'am.
because we did want confirmation. We had a meeting with the chief and assistant city manager, and we were trying to find out exactly where, as far as this point system, because there needs to be a change.
And thank you for educating me on it. I was not aware. Yes, ma'am.
So we thought that's where it was. But let me ask you a question about House Bill 121.
Yes.
What are we going to do differently this year that we didn't do last year?
Two things I know for a fact. One, we are scheduling a meeting with the Fulton County Commissioner, who was dead set against or in complete opposition of our bill last year, and worked every angle she could, or the individual could, to get the bill killed. We are planning a meeting with her for her to kind of stand down, for her to realize exactly what it means to Fulton County, what it means to the city of South Fulton. And it was ironic that we had a letter from Chair Rob Pitts that said the commission voted unanimously in favor of 121, as long as Charlie Brown Airport was carved out.
I think it's probably more appropriate that we have discussions like this outside of a public session.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Going that far.
Okay.
I'm asking a question, so he could answer that question, but not go there. His speakers, he was going. Is that what you're saying?
I think that when you start talking about legislative strategy,
Exactly.
you don't want to do that in advance of your.
But he could answer my question. So I guess what my thing is how are we going to cross the aisles more? I hear what you're saying, towards that, we're not going that deep into that. But we need to look at how we can cross the aisles more, how we can incorporate some others into this process.
I agree.
To cross that out.
Okay. The executive branch, specifically talking about the governor, is not the same governor that was 2 or 3 years ago. Obviously, this year didn't reach his desk. But our goal is for it to at least reach his desk. And if it does, we feel favorable that he would sign the bill. That's A. B, right, okay, maybe I need to talk in code. I don't want to say too much. Okay. But
You do have a plan to do things differently.
yes, there is a plan to do things differently, and that plan includes Fulton County Commission. That plan includes the executive branch of the state.
But I'm just saying, we don't need all of that.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, I did not see things happening last year.
Okay.
And I guess what I'm saying is if we need to incorporate others or whatever into this process.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Jackson.
I'm finished.
Okay, it's closed.
My question is there any plans, not before over the summer, to have a discussion with our local delegation, because it's my understanding they have been convening, and they do have plans to make changes to our charter. And so I just would love to be, know what they think that should be changed in our charter, because we do have some things we want to change in our charter as well, but we need to make sure that it's in, we have home rules. We're respecting home rules, and things are not being done with our consent. And so are you planning on setting up something prior to November for us to discuss with our local delegation to see if what they are planning on changing and what they're recommending that should be changed, and then they take our recommendations as well?
Madam Councilwoman, to answer your question, yes and no. Yes, I am in the works of setting up a meeting so that we can jointly come together and determine exactly what it is they want to do. But no, it probably won't be before November. I was looking at either the first or second week of November. To more directly answer your question, I had conversations with 2 of your state delegation members today, and I don't like the position that I'm in. And the position that I'm in is I am not aware of specifically what they are intending to do with the charter. They were both, they both admitted that there is charter reviews at this time, and they are talking to members of legislative council. Members of legislative council is who you speak with when you want to change language in a law or bill or whatever, they're the ones who write the language. But specifically what they're going to do, it wasn't that they were trying to hold it from me. They said they really didn't know. They're looking at things. And the other interesting thing they said was, Andrew, remember we share constituents. And I said, okay. He said, we are hearing from our constituents that changes do need to be made. So they didn't get specific on what that was or what they were planning to do, but they did say that they were looking at the charter and talking to legislative council.
Well, I just want to bring to your attention that, yes, we do share constituents, but there's such a thing called home rules. And they have to respect that we were elected to do a job. And if they are going to make changes to a charter that's going to mandate us, then the proper thing for them to do is to work with the council people that's going to be impacted by that. And not any of us have been spoken to about any of the charter changes. And so, I just, you know, I know you're in an awkward position, but just remember you're advocating for us.
That's right.
And then make sure that, you know, if those, it would not appear that it's any contention between us and them, they need to be working with all 8 of us before any changes are introduced.
The only other piece of information that I have that I can give this council at this time is that 2 weeks ago, when one of the members of the delegation were here, when they were here, I did speak with them, and they said that the delegation did meet, but it was not a complete delegation.
Will it help for us to do a resolution stating that home rule should be respected, and if there are going to be any charter changes, that they work with the council? Will that help for us to do some type of, I mean, we legally can't force them, but at least it will be something that as a council we stand behind.
Will that help at this moment? Probably not. I think the best thing to happen is, as you stated, for me to sit down with the delegation at their next meeting, whenever it is that they meet, or encourage them to meet, and get there with them, find out exactly what they want to do, or what they're intending to do, and then let you all know. The second thing is, there is going to be a meeting similar to the one last year, where you all, the council, the city council of the city of South Fulton was on one side, and the state legislature was on the other side, so we could discuss the 2020 legislative agenda, which we're talking about tonight. But that is in the works. And if you will remember, this year, that happened like the first or second week of January. I didn't engage with you all until Jan 1. So this year, we are a little bit ahead of the curve. I am going to plan that, or attempt to plan that before the holidays, where we can all sit down and intend what we're going to do for not only the 2020 legislative agenda, but for their intent on the charter changes.
Okay, well, I'll move on from this, but I will ask my colleagues if you will reach out to the people who represent you in your community and ask your legislators to please work with the council before any charter changes are filed with the General Assembly.
Thank you.
If in fact that they are considering the charter change, I would like to suggest that we actually have a meeting. And I think we should look at the model charter document that was created by GMA, who works with cities. Because as we've gone through this process over the last 2.5 years, we have found issues with the charter. And so the alleged council that they're using was the same when they created their charter. And I think we need expertise for people who deal directly with cities. We're all adults, so we need to have this conversation. And it needs to be maybe facilitated. Maybe we could get a representative from GMA to help engage, so we stick to the issues. So that would be my suggestion. It doesn't need to be emotional discussion. It needs to be based on facts and the practicality of some of the challenges that we encounter operating under this charter. And there are a number of them.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Ms. Gunn.
Thank you for this. So have our South Fulton delegation, have they seen this list?
Have they what? They have not.
Okay.
They have not. I have not sent it to any of the members of the delegation, no.
All right, so in regards to short-term rental regulations, so before the bill that was in, I guess, session last year, it failed because I'm not familiar with the bill as far as what was it trying to take away the city's responsibilities to regulate it, and they're bringing the bill back this year?
Yes, sir.
Short-term rentals.
Yes, ma'am. They're certainly going to bring it back.
So they're opposed to the cities or municipalities being able to regulate these?
It's not that they're opposed, it's the fact that they know that they cannot continue to operate the way that they've been operating. So they're willing, so they say, to work with cities and allow a few regulations, but kind of the regulations that they're okay with. They want to do something that they feel is going to be best for their hosts. And the only reason I know this is because I had lunch with the guy from Airbnb. He called me and said, Andrew, it's me. I'm looking for an additional consultant for a while, but I did not partner with him. But he said, we know we can't continue on the same way. And the bill we had last year, the bill that they introduced last year, would govern all 159 counties so that every county would have to treat short-term rentals the exact same. That bill said. And it's likely, if it's similar to what he introduced last year, it's likely going to fail again. To try to get all 159 counties on the exact same page, the counties are just too different. So I don't know what they're going to do differently, but their bill is going to be in favor of what they want. So if we want to do something different, then yeah, we would have to pass a different bill. I can let you know what that bill is doing, where it is. I can let you know when the committee meeting is. You can come out and testify in opposition of it, or whatever the case. But if we want our own legislation, that's a whole different route.
But it is anticipated to come back.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
Okay. The next thing was the single plastic use.
Mm-hmm.
So now that a lot of cities and other municipalities are moving forward with trying to, ban it in their, recreational facilities, you don't think that, I guess the state rep or someone would want to kind of champion that bill and take it through the House and the Senate? Or for the whole state?
I
Because
think
I see this as that it's going to move to, more cities are going to start coming on.
doing it more and more and more. I get it. No, I understand. It is going to escalate, and then eventually you want to have some kind of statewide governance over it. There's nothing on the books right now. There's nothing. Each county or municipality that has, cities are continuing to go more green, get greener, and smart cities and the whole nine. It could eventually get there, but right now there's no law in the state of Georgia doing, banning plastics at all. And if it is, anytime you introduce a bill, you got to think about who your opposition is. Folks like Kroger and Publix and Walmart and all their big lobby, they're going to flood the
Well,
office.
a lot of those changes are going green, and they're finding different ways to, kind of meet those cities' expectations. So,
Mm-hmm.
all right, that's all I wanted to know in regards to this. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gilliard.
Thank you for your report.
Yes, ma'am.
For two things. One of them is design standards and property rights. Do you know where that is in terms of the state? The state is moving towards, if you're a property owner, you should be able to do whatever you want to do with your property, and under the zoning laws, many cities, counties too, I guess, have, design standards and certain standards that property owners should follow. And so there's been some talk about trying to control it so that developers can do whatever they want to do. So if you have not looked at that, please follow. This is a big deal.
It is.
Follow up on that.
You're right. I am not prepared to speak on that right now. That was not in my notes or included in the agenda, but it was a bill that went through the General Assembly last year. It made it out of, I think it made it out of a House committee, and it made it onto the House floor, but the House voted it down before it could ever get to the Senate. So it didn't even pass that chamber. I do also remember, 46. Stevens, I know him personally. He used to be the commissioner of the Department of Transportation. He ran for his House seat again and won. He's the author of that bill. And I approached him one day because it came up during the session and you all asked me about it. And I asked him specifically, he said, Andrew, what I'm trying to do won't violate, I don't know, X, Y, Z, and I'm willing to talk to any city council member or, elected official who wants to talk to me about that. So I will reach back out to him. I know the author of that bill, and I remember the bill. Let me do some research and get something back to you. I just wasn't prepared to speak on that tonight.
And then the second thing is, blighted and vacant properties. You
Yes.
didn't say anything about that. And is it because the counties do it one way, the cities do it another, and never the twin shall meet? Is it something like that? Number D.
What I listed here was an example, Councilwoman, like in Jackson City, which has partnered with Macon-Bibb County, they have moved their condemning and demolishing property cases to their municipal court instead of their superior court in order to expedite the process. But I think the concern is the property owners feel that they don't have to do anything for the property. And even if it's, even if it's a blighted property, the city will then have to come in and manage the property or, maintain it or whatever, and that costs the city dollars. And you want to change it from that, so the property owner is more responsible for coming in to do X, Y, Z. Am I hearing you correct on that?
Yeah, but, so how is the state involved with it?
It is not a statewide bill. Again, that is something that will go through the municipality. That's more policy on the local level, whether it's county or city, and not a statewide law, not a statewide legislation. But it would be under, I don't know, there are one or two state agencies that could fall under. It could either be Environmental Protection Division, because once that property gets, run down as bad as it can, there's all kinds of, there's rats, there's healthcare issues, there's, kids have to walk past it every day going, on the school bus. But currently, at the moment, it's not a state law. It's not a state law.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Thanks for your report. I know a lot of stuff we discussed is not on here because it's not properly collected, desired, but I do want to point out one of the things that I had a conversation with you about, and I think I want you to monitor or either come back and advise, directions on where we can go to find these resources. 1994 crime bill, super predators. It's 25 years later, and now a lot of those quote unquote young people who were deemed super predators are on their way back home. We have to find some type of reentry programs or something of the sort to assist them, or we're going to be led by a similar situation again if we don't have resources. I just want you to really pay close attention to whatever resources may be available that we could assist our residents in.
I will, and I will get back to you on that. I will. Yes, sir.
Baker. Just for clarity, this is the second year of the biennial session?
That's correct.
So the bills that die, they'll just be gone.
If they die in 2020,
Yes.
yes, you have to reintroduce them in 2021, correct?
I know that there has been a little back and forth with the courts around our voting machine, so this is just another request that we just watch any information, any decisions that are being made around, that changes in our voting machines and when we might actually get some to. It's my understanding that right now, we may have them for our primaries in March. Is that correct, Mr. Adams?
Refer to the number sheets?
Yes.
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 Yes. I'm sorry.
And I know recently a judge required that we would, that those machines would have to have paper ballots. So just any updates that you hear about voting machines, I think many of us in here would be very concerned about that.
I will. To my knowledge, that bill passed. And the state, there was one vendor. And that was another reason why several people did not want that bill to pass. Why pass a bill when you can't even have a procurement process because there's only one vendor that can supply the specific language that you have in the bill? For whatever reason, they gave it to that vendor, and that vendor is starting to supply different precincts throughout the state with these vending machines. But as far as an update from that point, I do not have. I will gather that information and get it back to you.
Yes, great. Okay.
This is to follow up on a comment that was made earlier regarding possible termination of T-Splosh. I know one of the number one concerns I hear about residents is the condition of our roads. We have flooded bridges, and our current T-Splosh will not address all the needs that we have for repaving throughout our city. And so I just want to make sure that when we do have a conversation, that is a collective council work session thing as we talk about T-Splosh, because it has implications citywide. We need to continue to make some major investments in our infrastructure in the city.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bowman.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Clerk?
Council, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, council discussion regarding contract renewal for public works.
Good afternoon, good evening, Mayor and Council. I think this item, and I know we sent a brief memorandum out about it, but the discussion is just to notify you. I know we budgeted for the Public Works contract with Jacobs, but this evening, what we'll be seeking approval of is to renegotiate that contract within those parameters. I think the council has identified some key areas for which you want to see service improvements that were not included in the initial contract. And so what my request is to renegotiate many of those terms with Jacobs to be able to meet those service levels. And so for this evening, one of the things that I wanted to do prior to receiving that authorization is to receive some clear guidance on some of those areas for which we should focus.
I'm sorry, I cleared the queue. Can you please reiterate?
Sure.
Brown was first and I was
Mr.
second.
I think it's like that.
I'm sorry, I did not.
Do y'all want to?
You want to clear it again? We can
Clear it.
go order.
Yes, clear it, and let's go. Whatever you want.
Now I gotta raise it.
No, you don't.
It's clear.
It's clear now.
I'm second.
Well, let's go. Let's move forward. Ms. Rao, why don't you go ahead on and then we'll get it. Ms. Rao.
Was he gonna do the presentation about the terms of the general thing?
Yeah.
How we approaching it? Are we?
I thought he did his report.
So it's really receiving, so the memorandum that we sent
Right.
had all the details and the areas, but there are certain focuses that I know, I mean, some of them I know, but I think it's always good to have them on record, right-of-way maintenance, et cetera, et
Okay,
cetera. And
okay.
so it's just receiving them, we'll capture them as a part of the record, and then if authorized during the regular meeting, then we would negotiate those terms and bring them back to the council.
Okay. For me, I can tell you, retention ponds, in the area where I have a number of retention ponds that were grandfathered in previously under the county, and we are having all kind of issues with those retention ponds. And I know they're spread throughout the city, so it's just not my area, so that's something we need to look at. Also, additional maintenance along state routes. And I'll speak to that particularly where we have sidewalks. I think this not only impacts Hamilton Road, but it's Old National, those areas where that may not have been spelled out. So, you know, making sure the right-of-way is clear, but they're also treating and spraying those sidewalks so we don't have weeds growing through them. In addition, for me, just streetscape in general. I don't know that we had any funds dedicated to any type of beautification, and at least in our commercial corridors, that needs to be looked at.
Received and understood. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Ms. Kelly?
So, before our preference, y'all know how I feel about trash, okay? The value of this contract, I understand, is where it is. But for the past 2 years, I don't see, for a year and a half, the value that we're getting, for the contract. And I say that because, you know, I could send emails to say, hey, there's a mattress in the street, but I also see a bag of trash that someone illegally dumped. They'll just get the mattress and not get the trash. So when I say being proactive or taking a little bit extra step to address those issues, and I know clearly in my email it'll say, you know, there's a mattress in the middle of the street, but there's also a bag of trash. Because I went back to see if the trash was addressed. So this is something that I've talked about for quite some time, is that I don't feel like the value is there of what we're getting for the amount of money that we're paying. And I said, and let me calm down a little bit. The cameras is a very big thing. Trying to see if we can get more cameras in those hot spots. I just think that in this particular space that we're in with the trash, that it's just not corrected and I'm not seeing solutions. And that could be a situation that I address with you and the Director of Public Works, but we've been going at this for 2 years and I don't see any improvements. So I don't know, I mean, even in the right-of-way maintenance piece of it's bad. Vegetation, the trees overhanging, the signs, there's still a number of things that I have not seen the improvements, you know, unless, you know, I really get on people about it. I want it to be more of a, I mean, you don't see those type of things, and I'm gonna be honest, I hate to say North Fulton versus South Fulton, but it's true, you don't see that. And, you know, I hear a lot of people say, oh, well, it's our populace. I get that part as well. But what are we doing to create these type of solutions so it won't be our populace? I mean, we've tried education, we've done some cameras, we've done pretty much I can think of, but what else can we do? I don't know, we're looking at celebrities. We need celebrities for trash, is what she's saying. But I just would like to see more of what we're getting for our money.
Received.
Okay, Ms. Gilbert?
I have 5 comments, and they all relate to the contract. So I'm just going to list those that annoy me. The city manager is holding work orders, amendments to the contract, and processes invoices. And I think out of that list, the one that I don't understand more than any of the others is processing invoices. It appears to me that would be a business function or a function that would come under the finance department rather than the city manager's.
So they all of those things are delegated, so your city manager doesn't process any invoices, change orders, or anything, but what it is you're giving the ultimate authority to your chief administrative officer, who then delegates those responsibilities to Public Works and the appropriate department. So I think your note is appropriate, but the practical application is much different. It's the same way with any area. Your chief administrative officer oversees fire and police, but it is delegated to putting out a fire to the fireman. And so it's the same thing for that contract.
And so what about amendments to the contract?
It would be the same thing. Those things are recommended by either Public Works or whoever it is pushed up to the city manager to evaluate and then bring back before council. As such, we've not had an amendment.
So transition, let's talk about transition. So I did ask some time ago to get a list, and you did send me a list of equipment that we are leasing and equipment that we are leasing to purchase. So the contract says vehicles and equipment that are purchased becomes property of the city, and the contractor has a list provided to the city upon request, and the city has option to purchase the equipment. But I never did get any detail about that equipment, and I just don't understand why.
Well, you can let us know what detail you would like. I think some of those things would fluctuate. So if you're leasing a hammer jack and you're leasing it for 3 years, depending on whether you're in month 16 versus month 27, those costs would change. And depending on the lease term, when your purchase is, there's sometimes a buyout or you get it at wholesale. I mean, those things are the normal course of action. So you would have to give us some type of specificity of what exactly you're looking for. I think initially you just asked for a list of all of the vehicles, equipment, et cetera, and as you told me, we gave it to you.
Vehicles.
Okay, so what about the vehicles? Because I think you got.
There was no detail. There was no detail about what type of vehicle it was.
Okay.
What the year of the vehicle was.
Okay.
Even any mileage or anything about it. It was just
so what
vehicle.
So what you would like is, and I guess we can, now that we've closed out, because again, those things are going to change. If you got an F-150 and it's assigned, is going to change. So what we can do is request from the vendor, if this is the level that you're wanting, and again, I need some guidance on that, because I really, initially, I thought we were delivering what you asked, but if you're asking for, let's call it an end of the fiscal year update on where the vehicles were, we can request that from the vendor. Is that what you're?
What I want is, what do we have?
That part you have.
What we have, what make is it?
Okay.
What year is it?
Okay.
How much mileage is on it? How much it cost?
Got it. And so we will provide that as of 9, or we will request that and deliver as of 9:30. Because again, those things will change and we'll go from there.
So the other thing is the maintenance fund. So I looked at the formula back and forth.
Of course.
And then I saw that for 2020, it was projected to be 700 and, no, it's, I don't know what it is projected for 2020. I know for last year, it was 795, 667. So I would like to know how much it is for.
So that is included in the memo. I'll try to pull it up. I believe last year was at 597 and this year is at 697. But it is provided to you within that detailed memo that I gave to the council about a week or so ago. So I'll try to pull it up and answer that question at the end of these questions.
And the public education, I'm back to the public education. So I think that, not think, but it really is a conflict of interest for an outside organization, at least this is what I think, for an outside organization to have access to our database to mail, mail information, public education information about stormwater management or sanitation or whatever, particularly when on the board of the organization is people running for office. So they have access to our database.
What, excuse me, say what now? The board of what now?
I said real clear, I think that there is a conflict of interest for there to be an organization that is involved in our beautification endeavor.
Which organization is that?
Keep South Fulton beautiful.
So, Councilman, I think we discussed this.
You asked me.
But I think what you're saying is, I think we had a discussion about this at the last council meeting.
But I didn't finish it. So that is not something that is something that you talk about elsewhere. I don't see anything.
No, I think we can
wrong.
talk about it.
I do not see anything wrong with being transparent.
Yeah, no, I think we can talk about that here. I think at the last council meeting, we had a very robust conversation describing our South Fulton Beautiful Charter, and it is not using that group. I think we were extremely explicit about that is not the same group that is coordinating this activity. Our contractor has gone out and received the Keep Such and Such Beautiful Charter, which is a nationwide piece, and they are implementing under that initiative. So it is not one and the same. They are completely different. This group that you're referring to is not the same group that is coordinating our
As
initiative.
long as it's that definitive, I'm done. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm done.
Okay, Ms. Mayor. Okay, Mr. Khalid. So I want to double down on the detention ponds, the comment that my colleague Dr. Rao made, and say to me, I would like to see some asset mapping of those that are not under the governance of active HOAs. And in addition to detention ponds, there are also right-of-ways in some of our legacy communities. So, for example, in my community, in Forest Hills, Hay Hills, just past the elementary school, there is a right-of-way that no one takes care of in between some of the houses, and we saw this on our tour, gentlemen from Jacobs. In between some of the houses in these older subdivisions, particularly those I think classified as CUP, there are these rights of ways where trees fall in between people's yards or just whatever, or no one is mowing them. So I don't know how many of those there are. It just highlights in a city this size that we have newer communities that have HOAs where all of those things are sort of taken care of, and then we have a lot of older communities that don't have HOAs or they have defunct HOAs, and so the maintenance of these areas that were once right-of-ways are just not being taken care of. And I don't know how many of them there are and what the capacity is of Jacobs, but my residents are on C-Click Fix It. We'll just keep sending them to you.
Well, Councilmember, I think that's a great point that both you and Dr. Rao made, and we probably should revisit and talk about this detention ponds broader and get this on the record. We had detention ponds budgeted in FY 19 in the contract, but remember and our legal position was that these were the responsibility of Fulton County because they had adopted them. And so the pushback, I won't even call it pushback, the county declined to actually service these detention ponds. And so what the city has now done, and without raising taxes, without, pushing forward and adding additional undue burden on our residents, the city is now taking on the maintenance of those detention ponds in FY 20. And so I think that's something that, is a decision that you as a council made that is positive for our residents. At the same time, again, not raising taxes or adding any undue burden on them to now take that responsibility on and manage it. And it is inclusive in these maintenance funds.
All right, and then lastly, to amplify my colleague, so really, when we have that list of the vehicles, some of the vehicles and equipment, I understand we're leasing to own. Some of them we're just leasing. Mm-hmm. So just understanding like where we are with that, because I do think that some of us we want to at least evaluate long term if we can stand up our own department, and that asset list is going to be critical to make that.
Absolutely.
Okay, Mrs. Rose.
Yes, so I met with GDOT, Mr. Donald, and because I was a little frustrated about the litter and the right-of-ways and at the MARTA bus stop. And this was not something that we considered when we did the Jacobs contract. And what GDOT explained to me is that they're on a cycle of every 45 days to mow the right-of-ways. And they only pick up litter when they mow the right-of-ways. But in a lot of instances, what I've noticed is that they don't pick up the litter. They mow the paperwork in the mowing process. And so they said that the onus is on the cities, the municipalities, to keep up the right-of-ways, pick up the litter, and mow if we want it done more frequently. And they also sent me the state law that, that confirmed that. So I know people like to compare South with what happens in North, but one of the things that North Fulton does do is that they make an investment in keeping up their right-of-ways. They don't rely on GDOT at all to cut their right-of-ways. The onus is on the cities. And so at some point, we're going to have to take responsibility. If you want our city to look a certain way and be litter-free, we're going to have to start a robust litter campaign, start educating our students in our system, and we're going to have to take control of the litter in our community. Because if we're going to depend on government to do it, it won't get done. And so that's what the northern cities are doing. They're making an investment. They have people picking up litter frequently, and they also get out and do it themselves. As far as the legacy community, I will give you an example. Vermont Estates, community where my husband grew up. His mother still stays there. And they have a fundraiser once or twice a year where they raise money, and the onus is on them to make sure that the right-of-way in their legacy community is kept up. They beautify their own community. They make sure their own community, they make sure they pick up the limbs. And so it's unfortunate that a lot of the legacy communities don't have HOAs, but at some point, we're going to have to start taking ownership of our own community and the way our city looks.
Thank you, Mr. Willis.
I think, Mayor, and I wanted to make sure I got this correct, because I know that the cameras, and I was taking notes, and I'm trying to capture, of course we have to revisit the tape, we're trying to capture all of your concerns, but some of them do fall outside of the contract. So Councilmember Willis, you made a great point about GDOT, and we met with them the same day in separate meetings. But with GDOT, while they do not provide that level of service that we desire, but we're also not paying for it directly, they have those standby contracts that allow us to, that we can actually piggyback off of. And so I'm actually looking at the contract, and I want to make sure the detention ponds are actually a separate issue. So for the detention ponds, we budgeted for them in FY19. I'll confirm the FY20, but I believe it was included in maintenance. Please allow me to follow up with you after the meeting so I can give you a clear briefing on that, because I know that our legal position has been that the county accepted them and is supposed to be managing them, but there's a desire or the council is friendly to us doing so. With the right-of-way maintenance that GDOT does not carry out, the council has been fairly clear that we need that stuff taken care of no matter who does it. And so I literally have the contract in my box, and Mr. Valenzuela is working with procurement so that we can have access to that contract, piggyback off of it from the state, and then slightly adjust the scope to require them to not just mow over it one time, which is what they do, and leave it, but add the cleaning portion as well. And that cost would be much more reasonable than our partners at Jacobs doing it. And so I wouldn't go into great detail about that, because we would, again, we're asking for the ability to negotiate the contract. And so if we get this other service, that will be another tool for us. And then as far as the cameras, just kind of making sure I check and have that. Remember, in this year's budget, we actually, last year we did pilot things, and while we weren't completely pleased with it, it was not an add-on cost or service that we were charged for. And so this year we actually put money in the budget, and it's in CDRA's budget. So I just wanted to highlight that for you. And so what we should probably do is forward to the attention of those interested council members the plan of action in implementing that camera program.
Okay, let me just say we have about 5 more speakers, and we have about 37 minutes to 7. So, I'll go with Ms. Jackson.
Mr. Donald, I know we're saying that the detention ponds were grandfathered in. However, I have one in the Three Lakes community, and I was told that that was not a part. How are we going to, we're going to do the other detention ponds. I do believe that that needs to be included also.
Understood. So I think the simplest thing to do, and I know when we talked about it previously, we had the biggest concern and most immediate, because we were following transition, was those 33 that were grandfathered by Fulton County but not brought over to the city. Whose responsibility is it? We have not settled it legally, but I think you have a point. If we're going to take on certain ponds, we should look at what's equitable. But I would also say that is something that we need to evaluate the cost of that total endeavor and then bring it back before the council with an update. And we'll make sure.
We're going to evaluate all of them.
Absolutely.
Not just some.
Absolutely. And just to
Everybody pays
understand.
taxes, you know,
Understood.
we're all residents of the city. Also, what I would like to say, you're saying we're renegotiating this contract.
Mhm.
We're going to renegotiate it based on the amount that's currently,
Yes, ma'am.
that we're going to pay.
And so it wouldn't be any additional cost or anything of that nature, but it's almost like, you know, if you pay someone, if you've got a 3-bedroom home and you pay somebody to clean it and they charge you $100 a month, but you manage your kitchen yourself and you don't want them in there, well, you may add focus and say, hey, I want you to do these things differently now, but the cost doesn't change. We're doing, that's the same thing for us.
And my last thing, I keep hearing us saying the consequences that we would have to do. You know, when I was asking before, because I'm like, what's your name? Councilwoman Gov. Like her, I have been quite displeased.
Okay.
And I've expressed myself, and I've gone back and forth to Miss
Bill.
yeah, and told her my concerns. I do know some of the trash issues are based on these trash cans, that's fine, and I think it'll go away November 5th. However, if I call and I ask individuals questions, or if I come in and say in a 3-week period that I'm still seeing this same trash, and I ride my area so I know what I'm talking about,
Okay.
and you go and cut the grass and this trash is still there, I have a problem.
Understood.
So my thing is, we have a consequence when we're talking about canceling a contract. What is the consequence if they're not doing their job?
Correct. So on either side, there are breach of contract and all of those things that are included. And the service level agreement will kind of navigate that. And so I think that is the reason why we're looking at this renegotiation, is because at the beginning, I mean, as we all know, let's say our public works director was a member of Fulton County, so we didn't have the expertise helping to navigate and negotiate that. With that being said, had a year one the contract, some things satisfied, some things not. In this year, what we would do is, now that we have that expertise, we're asking to renegotiate that and develop the service level agreement that governs accordingly.
Okay, I hear you saying the public service director, and I guess you're saying that because he is over Jacobs.
Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
yeah.
I mean, it's
oftentimes we go, sometimes we choose to say it's this person that's over that department, and then we choose, you know, we pick and choose how we want to do that.
What do you mean?
Well, we just, sometimes we say the department head is over this, but then sometimes it's somebody else over. You see what I'm saying?
No.
Not necessarily, yeah, well, we're not gonna talk about that right now.
Okay.
But anyway, but what I'm saying is, at this point, I'm looking at, suppose Jacobs is doing the work.
Correct.
So we're paying Jacobs a lot of money.
Okay.
So I expect to see a lot of service.
Okay, understood. I think that's been the notion of the council, so there's no issue with that. Understood.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a suggestion to you, you want to take a recess and come back. So we'll make a
I move that we recess and continue work session at 7 p.m.
Second.
properly moved second, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? That passes unanimously.